birthday anniversary review. Although the weather seems to have prevailed, it's good to see such a large audience here tonight. The audience last night really enjoyed our program. I hope all you people here do as well. To kick it all off, why don't you put your hands together for Josie Evans, who's going to introduce us to our first decade, the 1930s.
1930s. The 1930s began badly, rallied briefly, then relapsed into World War II. Despite this, the decade saw the launching of Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary, the greatest ocean-going liners the world would ever know. The appearance of the first nylon stocking, the first flight of Igor Sikorsky's helicopter, from the Alexandra Palace in London, the first television transmission, the invention in France by a Hungarian of the ballpoint pen, and the building of a place to use it in, Barrow High School. But the opening of Barrow High in March 1930 was overshadowed by more momentous events. The collapse of the New York Stock Exchange on Black Friday had occurred only 6 months previously, and the effects of what was to be called the Great Depression were already being felt in Australia. Farlat was poisoned in America. Japan occupied Manchuria, and 3 years after the opening of Barrow High, the months of direct consequence, Adolf Hitler seized control in Germany. But it wasn't all bad news. Sydney Harbour Bridge was opened in 1932, and the new President of the United States, F.D. Roosevelt, announced the New Deal that was to put the world back on the road to economic recovery. Longer dresses were in fashion, and people could afford more clothes, so F.J. Cantrill invented the laundrette. The rumba was the dance of the day. In 1936, Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind was published. 3 years later, the film version won a slate of Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and for Vivien Leigh, Best Actress. Don Bradman became Australian captain, and in 1938 attained a tour average of 115. In 1938, S.K. Barker took over as headmaster of Barrow High. In retaliation, Hitler occupied Austria and Czechoslovakia. Britain and France guaranteed Poland's security. Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact in August 1939. A week later, Hitler invaded Poland from the west, followed by the Soviet Union, which attacked from the east. Thus began the partition of Eastern Europe, the dismantling of which we are now only just beginning to see. On the night of September 3rd, Robert Gordon Menzies broadcast to the Australian people. It is my melancholy duty to inform you that, as a consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war on her, and, as a result, Australia is now also at war. So Barrow High was at war too. Nothing happened for a while. In December, 3 small ships of the Royal Navy sank the German battleship Graf Spee in the Battle of the River Plate. So the decade ended on an optimistic note, a falsely optimistic note. In 1939, the American novelist John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath was published. No novel, no title, better sums up the decade.
Burpees, commence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Attention. Swimming, commence. Left. Right. Left. Right. Left. Right. Press straight, commence. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. And attention. Okay, that'll do us for today. Back into your line, ready for marching. Marching, go! Left,
I'm so cold. I feel like my bones are going to break. I'm so hungry. I'm sick of those soup kitchens. Soup, soup, soup. They gave us a big plate of loop of the loop. Soup, 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 soup. They gave us a big plate of soup. Soup, soup. Does anyone have a spare newspaper?
When a man was lucky enough to he was said to have a half day. Fathers and schoolboys often had to wear pants which were patched by material which did not always match the original. On gusty days, a naughty and inquisitive wind could also reveal the fact that mothers and daughters were similarly attired, hence the title Half Days of Patched Pants.
I don't mean to smoke. You don't put a chimney in your back. I said, you have a chimney in your back. Got a mention of smoke.
No, I've been smoking since I was knee-high on a Muscovy duck. No, me no, huh?
It's turned the ceiling brown. Your insides must be the same colour.
Well, there's nothing wrong with my insides that a good feet wouldn't fix.
You had a nice green salad for tea.
If I've got it meant to eat green feet, it'd have given them teeth like a rabbit.
Never satisfied. What more do you want?
Meat, woman. That stuff that comes from the south end of the Bullock and north.
You spit in that fire of kid. Out. It's our last bit of wood.
What about the old case Mike brought in from the pugger?
I used it to make the tea.
Eh?
I used it to boil the water for your tea.
Oh, Struth, things are tough.
It could be worse off.
Old Brown reckons they're going to take beef off the rations and give us lamb instead.
It's all meat.
Beef's for men, lamb's for boys. Like to see them government blokes live on what we get.
I suppose their orders came from higher up.
God had nothing to do with it.
The men at the top of the government.
About time now I've got down a peg or two. We're all trapped.
I was talking to Taffy Carroll yesterday. He reckons if you're careful, you can still make things meat.
Taffy's an ignorant Irish coot. Wouldn't know if his own met with a redback spider.
Don't be so rude.
What's rude about being bitten on the tongue by a spider? Have a look at this place. It's a breeding ground for spiders. Oh, there's Horace again. He was on the Dunny Sea last night. Teeth like an alligator.
Don't be ridiculous. Spiders haven't got teeth.
Teeth or not, he'd do a man a nasty injury. You know, can't understand why the blokes who built these places put the roof so low. A man can't stand up without bouncing his head on the ceiling. Blokes parts that Dunny and that was built for sitting down.
We'll have to stop smoking your pipe in the lavatory. Smells like the inside of gasworks, Jimmy, when you finish.
You know, I can't understand why the blokes who built these places put their dunnies down the bottom of the yard.
I can.
Bloke needs a pipe to get down this thing, sure.
Spend half your life in the lavatory. Goodness knows what people think.
No, I don't care what people think. I know what's wrong with things.
I wish I did.
Yeah, ask yourself a question, woman. It's the capital's fault. Them blokes with all the money. Tired as rusty nuts. Wouldn't give you the time of day if they had the town clock in their hip pocket. If a war started tomorrow, there'd be money around everywhere.
Stitching time. Saves time. Monday's day.
Yeah. Yeah, he sits tight. Usually stays where he is.
Are you talking?
You sitting there night after night stitching clothes while my stomach rattles like two skeletons dancing on a tin ring in a hailstorm.
I can't do anything about it. You ate your meat ration last Thursday.
It's time somebody did something.
Mike will have to go to the soup kitchen for his lunch tomorrow.
Yeah. They've teamed up with the capitalists and the government too.
Who?
The priests and the salvos who own the soup kitchen.
Against everyone.
And against kids being hungry and strong men being idle.
My grandfather and grandmother lived in a small single-fronted house across the road from Papa. My grandfather started working when he was only 9 years old. He can't read or write, but he didn't have to carry comfy brickmaking. He's supposed to be deaf, but Grandma says he can hear when he wants to. There's a lot to say about a being called the depression and about the people living our street like the city, my best friend. I can't remember the first time I saw sitting down the Papa. Sometimes I think we're all down there. But Grandma says we're on the kitchen table. See, don't know much about the depression or where babies really come from, but sometimes I think about them.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, City, what are you ready to do?
There's my cat's tail. I reckon it's the longest cat's tail in the world.
Eh?
I'm trying to look at it so I can watch it grow.
Where's your cat now?
Went mad. Bored my woman, knocked the timber off the table, got outside, jumped on the fence, flew across the road and disappeared down the cover.
Might never see it again.
Got to get my lure back somehow.
Might be hiding in the bushes.
That's what I reckon. Stick a bowl of milk and tug on the wall. We'll come up to the fence instead.
That's pretty clever.
But he didn't come down much down. I'll get my lure back. Watch him as he hits when they come.
How do you reckon you'll have?
25
private politics easy. God, some cat I tell you. I wonder where kids and babies really come from. No one put them records government draperies and children only. We can ask my grandmother if you get a chance. Here you go.
I'm pleased to see.
His old woman ought to be patching his pants.
She finds it hard to thread a needle.
She has no trouble lifting a bottle to her lips. She's on a method, you know. Struck a mention in her, now she burst into flames.
City I feel sorry for. Poor little mate. His kids were full of post. Never had a decent father.
Yeah, that crowd's all the same. Tell me his old woman was washing her legs one day. Found a pair of... What's wrong with your head, son?
And stuff.
I knew a bloke who had nits once. Used to call him the dame. Scratched a hole in his head. You'd see his brains inside.
Don't talk such rubbish. Turn around, see? Here, look at your head. Yes, my boy, you've got head lice.
That's what I said to Mr. Eat.
I'll use one last. My word, they are big ones.
Nits are like dog's fleas. Once you got them, you're there for good.
A rinse and hand kerosene lane city. That'll get rid of it.
So, did I ever tell you, lads, how my champion sheepdog used to get rid of his fleas up the Darwin country?
Told from a dozen times.
Tell us again, Grandpa. How much stuff there?
Look, I was a rough carpenter, see, up in sheep country. That means I built sheds and fences and sheep pens for the station owners out there. Second-hand timber and galvanised iron. Built a woolshed once for old Ebenezer Toad. God, he was a tough nut. Anyway, had a hell of a storm 6 weeks later, and the whole thing collapsed on his shearers. That was hell of a fire, isn't it?
What did Mr. Toad say, Grandpa?
Well, he comes at me like a bull of a gun. I thought you're supposed to be a rough carpenter, he says. I am, I says, pointing to the heap of iron and timber. What do you want rougher than that?
Let's get the hand of and stuff.
Nah, he was a sandwich dog.
What sort of dog is that?
Half-breed. Mother was quarter dingo, his father 2/3 bull.
There's no bulls in Australia, dear.
This one was smuggled into the country by an Afghan camel driver. Oh, yeah. Rufus was his name. God, he was clever. Had this special trick of getting rid of his fleas.
What did you do, Mister?
Well, when he was out in the bush, he'd pick up a stick and swim it into the river for half an hour. All the fleas crawl up his back and onto his nose, then out along his stick. Then Rufus would let the stick go and they all float away.
Gee, that's clever. I was surprised by the border. Right down before he hits his city. Yeah, never thought of that.
You'd be safe washing your head in kerosene, my boy. No one gets up.
What happens when it's a secret, huh?
Well, I thought I had old Toad summoned for the woolshed schmozzle, so I offered to send Rufus out to round up his sheep. Wandered off into the sand hills and he hadn't seen him for 3 months. I had a word with Rufus. Rufus, I says, don't you come back until you've found every sheep on this station.
Doesn't get tough, Mister.
Yeah. Rufus was away for 6 months. Everyone thought he was a goner. But I knew better. One morning there was a great cloud of dust on the horizon. Everyone thought it was a giant willy-willy. But I knew it was Rufus. He brought in 4,000 sheep, 74 pigs, 17 emus, 15 wombats, and 4 galahs with broken wings.
Gee.
Yeah, so the galahs held him up. Couldn't walk as fast as the sheep.
Yeah, put your head up, City. You look
Wasn't much I could do. Kept him warm, tried to put some salty bills on board in his throat. But it didn't do any good. Just sat by the campfire and winked all night. Next morning he kicked the bucket, just as the first checkers won. Buried him under a heap of stones. Made a cross out of 2 sticks. Drove him into the ground over the grave.
Always make your story sad. Should think of the children.
Oh, you can't put kids in glass cases. The world's a tough place. The sooner they learn about it, the better.
Did Rufus ever have pups and stuff?
Men dogs don't have pups, son.
My cat's not having 26.
Not 26, City. More like 6.
My woman said 26.
Mother City, not a real woman.
Grandpa, where did kittens babies come from?
What? I think you better ask your grandmother that one, Mom.
Grandpa?
Well, when did we go to the hospitals together?
I thought they were all on the kitchen table.
Well, if they don't have enough money to go to the hospital, well, the doctor brings them to the house, and then they're born.
Their baby wasn't born this season.
It's getting late. It's time you boys were in bed.
Oh, you always change the subject when it gets interesting.
I'll learn about such things soon enough.
It's never too soon to learn about life. Think I'll take them up to Botanic Park on Sunday.
What's that stuff?
Oh, it's a meeting place for the workers.
It's no place for boys.
Rubbish, woman. I'm going to tackle the government about taking beef off the rations. We could start from.
Well, Grandpa.
I suppose if you keep out of trouble,
Come on, Sid. That's getting in money to Sid.
that's all right, City. Now you see you look after those boys, huh?
Oh, safe as houses.
Women's fashions became more complex. Dress generally became brighter and more varied. There were several styles of fashion at any one time, so people were free to choose what they wanted to wear. Leisure pyjamas of the 20s were not court states for women until 1936. They suited the bachelor girl image that the post-war woman was trying to promote. As the 30s progressed, women's dress became more feminine. They gave up the boyish look of the 20s and had their hair permanently waved, often in the style of Hollywood film stars. They put on makeup, nail varnish, bangles, earrings and necklaces. Long skirts and more feminine lines were now back in fashion. Puff sleeves, popular in 1934. Practical inventions influenced fashions. Clothes became easy to get into as zip fasteners arrived and elastic compressed studs replaced tapes, hooks and eyes. Backless evening gowns revealed the feminine shape. They were long and form-fitting, often cut on the bias, a style popularised by actress Jean Harlow. Streamline was the term for this decade, as seen in the women's thin bodies and tight garments.
Ballroom dancing was a very popular pursuit in the 1930s. Our following dance is a swing waltz, which is a very good example of the elegant ways people danced in those times. Pardon me. Mr. Ford choreographed this dance, and here it is. I bet none of you can guess who it was. We've even built a memorial museum in remembrance of this man's great efforts. Dame Arkives is about to sing a song that went hand in hand with this man and was written about the same time. This is our Don Bradman.
Who is it that all a stranger raves about? Who has won our very highest praise? Now is it Amy Johnson or little Mickey Mouse? No, it's just a country lad who's bringing down the house. And he's our Don Bradman. Now I ask you, is he any good? Our Don Bradman, as a batsman he can surely on the wood. For when he goes into bat, he knocks every record flat. For there isn't anything he cannot do. Our Don Bradman, every batsman dips his bib to you. Kimpacks and the rest prove that they were equal to the best. How gallantly and nobly we know they've done their share, but there's one that tops them all, a real devil may care. And he's our Don Bradman. Now I ask you, is he any good? Bradman, as a batsman he can certainly conclude. Take a novel, meet their fate, for it's always shut the gate when the boy from Barrel hits 4 after 4. Don Bradman always manages to top the score.
During the war, over 500,000 Australians, 1 in 12 of the population, would have served overseas. In the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg and France, using her new blitzkrieg tactics. In May, 300,000 British and Allied forces were evacuated from Dunkirk. Despite this, in Australia, Arthur Dunstan won a bicycle race riding backwards, reaching speeds of 42 kilometres per hour. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of Britain. The world's first strategic air battle, the Battle of Britain, began in July and Germany suffered her first reverse. In the words of Churchill, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Hitler invaded North Africa, Crete and Russia. John Curtin of the ALP became Australia's Prime Minister. Moments later, on December 7th, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. But 1942 was to be the turning point of the war. The United States had declared war on Germany, Italy and Japan. In the south, the British 8th Army defeated the Germans and Italians at El Alamein, and in October, the Russians counterattacked at Stalingrad and began their remorseless, bloody push to Berlin. At home too, Australia had to cope with another invasion, American GIs. These free-spending visitors changed the world wherever they went. One British whip wrote of them, they're overfed, overpaid, oversexed and over here. Their influence began a dominance of popular Australian culture that was to last 20 years. Not least because 12,000 Australian girls returned with servicemen to the United States after the war. By this time, Barrel High School students were fighting in North Africa, the Middle East, Malaya, Papua New Guinea and with the RAF in Britain. Thoroughly alarmed, Italy surrendered and declared war on Germany. And then the end. On the 28th of April 1945, Mussolini was shot, hung from a lamppost and set alight. On the 30th, Hitler committed suicide, and on the 6th of August, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. And so back to normal. Ben Chifley, who with John Curtin had guided Australia through the war, was dumped by the electorate. Menzies became Prime Minister again. Winston Churchill warned the West about the USSR and spoke of an Iron Curtain across Europe. Blue Hills began its record run on ABC radio, and the first national championship of marching girls was to set the tone of Australian cultural life for the next decade.
many changes to women's costumes. During these years, the Americans began to influence clothing as the Germans occupied Paris. Women reflected a uniform look, with broad padded shoulders, shorter, fuller skirts and nipped-in waistlines. Because of the hard times inflicted by World War II, any show of flamboyancy was considered tasteless. To enable everyone to be dressed in Australia during the war, a book of coupons was given to each person. Clothes were rationed and the yearly allowance was 112 coupons. In 1947, after World War II ended, a dramatic event occurred in the fashion industry. Designer Christian Dior, on reopening his house in Paris, introduced a style called the New Look. It featured natural shoulders, small waistline and a longer, very full skirt. After the uniformity of the early 1940s, the women happily accepted the new look. Women breathed a huge sigh of relief as rationing ended in the late 1940s and a new wardrobe of clothes became possible. In evening dress, there were two lengths. The new ballet length to the ankles, or a skirt to sweep the floor. Yards of material went to make evening dress, narrowing from the tiny waist in myriads of gathers or clothes.
Do you think that anyone tells you I forgot? You have no discipline, and to survive, a regiment must have discipline. So I have no strings, you can't mind to listen. When I have my eyes right, I want to hear those eyeballs click, and the gentle pitter-patter of falling danger. Achoo! Who snares? The person who snares will own up immediately, or else I'll execute the front rank. Gun up! Execute the front rank! Now, I shall ask again. Who snares? Gun up! Execute the second rank! Now for the last time. Who snares? Do you snare? Yes, sir. Bless you!
I'll never forget the people I met, breaking those angry skies. I remember well as the shadows fell, the light of hope in their eyes. And though I'm far away, they still can hear me say thumbs up. For when the dawn comes up, there'll be flowers over the white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait and see. There'll be love and laughter and peace ever after. Tomorrow, when the world is free. The shepherd will tend his sheep, the valley will bloom again, and Jimmy will go to sleep in his own little room again. There'll be flowers over the white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait and see. There'll be love and laughter and peace ever after. Tomorrow, when the world is free.
And how better to start than with a few wars. Having driven the nationalist Chinese to Formosa, the new communist Chinese government under Mao Zedong invaded Tibet. War broke out in Korea. Australia, never backward in coming forward, joined the Commonwealth Brigade in Korea and sent troops to help crush communist insurgency in Malaya. The Soviet Union invaded Hungary, and Britain and France joined Israel in a brief war against Egypt. And back in the USA, Senator Joseph McCarthy raised anti-communist hysteria to a fever pitch, which even reached Hollywood, which is why films of the 50s are so bland and odorless. At home, Prime Minister Menzies tried to ban the Communist Party, the Labour Party split, and everyone was looking for reds under the beds. On a calmer note, Queen Elizabeth was crowned at Westminster Abbey, and Hillary and Tenzing climbed Mount Everest. And oil was cheap, so cheap that men would put in their hair. This was the decade of rock and roll, Philistines, bigots, and the new materialism. Everyone wanted a 5-row house, a Holden, and in 1956, a black and white television. TV offered Brian Henderson on Bandstand, Johnny O'Keefe, Graham Kennedy, and American imports of the calibre of I Love Lucy. In their love affair with television, Australians uncomplainingly watched badly directed, ham-acted sitcoms and a stream of mindless advertisements. Nothing much has changed. But TV arrived in time for the Melbourne Olympics. Above all else, the 50s was for Australia the decade of sporting success. We beat the United States 5-0 in the Davis Cup. We won all the freestyle gold medals in the Olympics. In 1956, Lou Hode beat Ken Rosewall in an All-Australian Wimbledon final. The names of Frank Sedgman, Marlene Matthews, Marjorie Jackson, Jimmy Carruthers, Kel Nagle, Jack Brabham and John Lanty belong to this era of the invincible, shallow Australian. Yet through it all, there were signs of something deeper. Jörn Lutzen won a prize for the design of an opera house. Ray Lawler's Summer of the 17th Dog was produced in Melbourne, and Patrick White published The Tree of Man and Voss, works that were to win him the 1973 Nobel Prize for Literature. The decade ended with American paranoia at its height. The Russians had the bomb, and in 1957 they had the first satellite in space. In 1959, the Russians launched the first lunar satellite. It photographed the far side of the moon. The space race was on.
Many actresses set fashion trends and extremes. Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield brought attention to the full bust line. Evening dresses in the early 50s tended to be strapless, with tight-bone bodices and full sweeping bouquant skirts, held in shape by stiffing petticoats. Accessories such as gloves and hats were vital, more so than shoes. Certainly no outfit, day or evening, was complete without gloves. In the evening, these were long, made of satin and coloured to complement the dress. For daywear, there were two main silhouettes: the straight and slender for dresses and suits, and the wide ankle look used for coats. Dior forecast a return to the shape of the 20s with his H-line and A-line of 54 and 55.
Our next act is entitled They're a Weird Mob. It's a play and it shows the view of an Australian through an Italian migrant's eyes, when in the 1950s, thousands of European immigrants landed on our shores. They influenced the way we ate, drank and viewed the world. Please welcome them.
Hello, mate.
Nino, I had no idea. Who is it?
Arkives, the old Nino. It isn't on yet. I've just decided.
Oh, I thought you meant Sue.
It will be soon. I'm going to find a girl and I'm going to marry her. Now, Eddie. Don't you go thinking up of any of your scrawny mates. Where you look, Nino? I do not know yet. Listen, Edie. Where do the Sheilas go these days when they're on the prowl?
How would I know?
Well, who wouldn't, who would? What sort of Sheila you got in mind? No particular sort. Dogs are easy on the eye. They get dirty quick. Redheads are too quick on the trigger.
Watch it.
Hey, bite your head off. Better make that a brunette. They're nice to play. Generally got hairy legs. But, geez, I don't know. Got any ideas? Not a clue.
When do you want to get married?
As soon as possible. What about Bondi?
Too wet.
Manly?
Of course so. Could be. That was best place.
Want me to come with you? No thanks, I'd rather go alone. Probably safer. Light up something good, she'd like it to lunch on the beach. Manly, you think?
Yeah, Mel, you think you're going now?
Yes, I think I'll go now. Good hunting.
Nothing spending camp?
Nah, weather's got to end. Excuse me, it is not possible to eat the spaghetti with the spoon.
Mind your own business.
Put it up forward. You hold it upright and twirl it around. The spaghetti winds itself on. Very easy.
Are you having spaghetti too?
Yes, I am.
Well, come over here and show us how.
Please, try it with the fork. It is much easier.
Mind your own business.
I'll introduce myself. I'm a Nino Carlotta.
I won't tell anybody.
They call me. This is Kate.
How do you do, Dixie? How do you do, Kate?
So what are you doing out on an evening like this?
I'm not looking for a wife. Nobody. I mean, I'm looking for someone whom I can marry. Who is my type and whom I can marry.
Trying to do.
You do not appear to like me very much.
Give me 3 reasons why I should.
I'm strong, I'm not married, and I have money in the bank.
Think up 3 other reasons.
The last reason is very interesting. How much?
Are you interested in getting married?
Maybe.
Charlie will be here soon.
Yeah, Charlie.
Who is Charlie?
He's the man I'm going to marry.
Oh, you're engaged?
Sort of.
What does this mean?
Well, I suppose I'm married for something.
Better. Break your neck if you don't.
Probably would too.
Are you engaged?
No, she's free at the moment. Ouch! What's that for?
Miss Kate, you're a very bad-tempered young lady.
I think you ought to mind your own business.
Now, children, no fighting in public.
You're a very bad-tempered, but you have the most beautiful eyes.
Thanks.
And I like your hair. It is a very clean.
What do you think of my foot?
It appears to be a very nice foot. You should not kick it at people with it.
What did you say your name was?
Nino. Nino Carlotta.
Italian?
Yes, but I'll be the Australian soon.
Poor Australia.
Are you after one of us now?
That is correct.
This will be...
No, you're engaged. I'm a courting Kate.
Great suffering cats. What have I done to deserve this?
Yes, I think I'll get her married to you. help me! Look, you're not serious, are you? I'm perfectly serious.
Do you ever smile?
Yes.
Go on, smile. Let's see. So what do you think it is? Reasonably clean? How often do you shave?
Every morning.
Hair seems okay. What size shoe do you wear?
Size of the 8.
Any cord?
No.
Bunions?
No.
Varicose veins?
What are these?
You'd know if you had them. No varicose veins. Have you ever had any serious illness?
I had the measles when I was a child.
Perhaps we can overlook that? Any insanity in your family?
No.
I don't agree with you there, but we'll skip that. Were your father and mother married?
Yes.
And you're not married?
No.
All this will last too. Okay, when do we start, Nina?
Start what?
Courting. You're after me, remember?
Hey, not serious.
Why not? He gets to know me, I get to know him. At the moment, I've been using nuisance and he thinks I'm bad tempered. We could both be right, or we could both be wrong. I think I'll find out.
Golly, champion. Oh, don't even know what's Charlie, come over here. Charlie, this is Dino.
How do you do? G'day, mate.
Charlie, they're courting.
What?
Courting.
Who are?
Kay and Nina.
No. Anybody watch?
Go on, start.
Start what?
Courting.
The introduction is the start. This has been done. It is not possible to do any more in public.
Just like all men, he likes to work in the dark.
You should laugh more often. It makes you look very attractive.
It's on.
Looks like a horse since you laughed.
It does not. You look very attractive.
Okay. No, to bite my head off. So how long have you been in Australia for, Nina?
Nearly 2 years.
And where do you live?
Punchbowl.
Punchbowl? What's from Alice Springs, mate?
I do not know. I've not been there.
So, what do you do for crafts, Nina?
I'm at a bricklayer.
And you're Italian?
Yes.
Holy smoke. Wouldn't he be popular at your house, Kay? Kay's old man, the builder. And he reckons he has to pay brickies twice as much as they're worth. And he hates Italians.
Can't blame for that. Place to get nails with.
I do not care whether Kay's old man likes the Italians or not. And I've had you, so pull your Australian while it's still stuck in your neck.
Listen, mate, you look for a dicky.
You wouldn't have lasted 2 minutes. You'd find yourself out there in the gutter, and I have to get the council to come and shift you. Besides, it's not a gentlemanly fight in front of the ladies.
Ladies? What ladies?
Now listen here, you big eh?
Have a happy time, you two. Would you like to escort me to the wilds of Manly, Dino?
I would have liked that very much. Good night, Dixie. Thank you very much. Good night, Charlie. Why were you sort of bad-tempered when I came to your table, Kay?
Sorry about that. I thought you were just another wolf. I'm sick of them.
I am at a wolf. We'll go to your house and meet your terrible father.
Not tonight, Nino. But I'll let him know you're lining up for a visit.
In the 1950s, there were many popular hits, as Jenny Markovita and the rock band formed earlier on with Tears on My Pillow. Another very famous one was It's My Party by Leslie Gore. Gemma Tillman's just about to sing this for you, accompanied by Miriam, Ginny and Rory Million vocals, and Danny, Matt, Joshua, sorry, that's not Joshua, it's Phil and Michael. a display of elegance anymore, as it is something to do for fun. The following dance is the jive, and the dancers will be accompanied by the big band, which will be playing Rock Around the Clock.
we lived in a fool's paradise. Oil was still cheap, the third world was developing, the world economy was booming. In Australia, the Liberals were in the middle of a comfortable 23-year reign. But a voice was whispering things we didn't want to hear. The Club of Rome warned us that we couldn't go on like this. The resources of the world were not infinite. But who cared? Everyone had a job, and everyone wanted to live like the Beach Boys said they did in California. On the 14th of February 1966, Australia changed to decimal currency. The prosperity of the West trickled down to the young, and in a space of a few years, the way we live underwent a revolution. In 1964, Beatlemania gripped the affluent world. There's been nothing like it before or since. Men started washing their hair. Shares in Brylcreem Corporation plummeted. Within a decade, the ubiquitous barbershop had disappeared. By 1966, it was legs. Swinging London gave the world the miniskirt and the mini minor to tuck them in. Free love became the slogan of the new permissiveness, and James Bond showed us that you could do anything to anybody as often as you like. Lee Harvey Oswald shot President Kennedy. Keeping up with the times, the Pope allowed Roman Catholics to eat meat on Fridays. And while everyone was partying, Australia committed troops to a hopeless guerrilla war. in the support of a corrupt regime in South Vietnam. The lives of another generation of young men were jeopardised, this time to keep the Liberal Party in office. But the lessons of the past were being learned. For the first time, the generation at risk said no and began a campaign of demonstrations against the war. Concorde flew for the first time in 1969. The 50s had ended in a space race with the Soviet Union in the lead. The 60s ended with the all-or-nothing bid by the United States to put a man on the moon. In an achievement of technology and faith, amazing, even 20 years later, the Apollo program put 2 men on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, on the 21st of July 1969, and everyone watched it on TV.
John Lennon and we're the Beatles. It's great to be here tonight in Australia. Thanks for inviting us.
How long are we going to be here for, George?
What was that?
I said, how long are we going to be here for?
Oh, about 5 to 8. Come on, guys, let's get into it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
love you. Hey. Well, what if those words didn't happen to MST? Hey, Jack.
Yeah, man.
Turn on the tranny.
What'd you say, man? Play that one up again.
I said turn on the transistor.
Baby, I love you.
Just press the button, man. Missionary dinner, $3. Teacher dinner, $2. Hippie dinner, $6. When the waiter arrived to take her order, she inquired, "Why is the hippie so expensive?" Baby, he answered, "You should see the workmen trying to get one of them clean." I'm going to ring the police, yes. Well, yes.
The nuclear threat has pushed up the national debt. But love is free. So spread it round quickly.
She's shy and retiring, but don't be too hard on her. Here's Miriam Janee singing Leader of the Pack with Gemma Tallman, Heidi and JUBILEE.
fashion was geared to the young, and manufacturers had difficulty in producing enough of the growing needs of teenagers. For the teenagers of the 60s, the trend centre was English designer Mary Pond and her... The eye was now drawn from the bosom of the 50s to the leg of the 60s. She designed cheap, waistless, sleeveless dresses with matching coats, boots and stockings, creating a tailor look which was different from anything which had gone before. The 1960s also saw the hippie look for both men and women. Silver studs on body and a work shirt. The Beatles influenced fashion with bright bold prints, including dots and stripes. The tailored pantsuit was introduced in 1966 to the delight of women. By 1969, hemlines were uncertain. Was it the mini, the midi or the maxi? It was during the 60s that the Barrow High School uniform changed from the box pleats to a style from which today's senior uniform has evolved.
slowly, began to realise that the earth had to be treated with respect. The first year of the decade saw the two worst natural disasters of the century. In May, an earthquake in Peru killed 70,000 people. In November, cyclones and tidal waves killed 500,000 people in Bangladesh. 4 years later, on Christmas Eve, Cyclone Tracy devastated Darwin. In Melbourne, a man-made disaster, the Westgate Bridge collapsed and killed 34. In more signs that the good times were over came with the outbreak of international terrorism. In September of 1970 alone, 5 international jet airliners were hijacked. In 1972, Arab terrorists killed members of the Israeli Olympic team at Munich. In 1978, the Prime Minister of Italy, Aldo Moro, was kidnapped and killed. In 1979, Earl Mountbatten and his 14-year-old grandson were murdered by the IRA. And, to get the next decade off to a good start, the Ayatollah Khomeini returned to exile from Iran. Back home, we didn't have terrorism, but the next best thing, a threat to the conventions upon which democracy is based. The Conservative governments of Queensland and New South Wales reached the Senate Replacement Convention, and the federal opposition denied supply to the elected government. In the constitutional crisis that followed, the Governor-General, Sir John Kerr, dismissed the Whitlam government and appointed Malcolm Fraser caretaker Prime Minister.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
Since then, everyone who engineered the dismissal has died or been disgraced. But it was not all bad news. For one thing, in the 1970s, every student now enrolled at Barrow High School was born. It was the decade that gave us punk rock and the one of the 3 great achievements in space, the launching of Voyagers 1 and 2, which extended man's reach to the edge of the solar system. If anything, the 70s was the decade of women. In 1970, Australian Germaine Greer published The Female Eunuch, the book that galvanised the women's liberation movement throughout the Western world. 2 years later, all female workers in Australia were given equal pay. World Series cricket led to a general decline in men's sport, but not women's sport. In 1972, Shane Gould was the first and only woman to hold all world freestyle records at once. Margaret Court and Yvonne Goolagong dominated world tennis, and Heather Mackay world squash. And on the 2nd of July 1971, the spectacular new suspension bridge across the Clyde River in Scotland was opened. Its name, the Erskine Bridge.
Trend. Clothing styles have become largely a matter of individual taste. The T-shirt came to life for both men and women. White was abandoned in favour of bright colours and slogans were printed on the front. Tight pants were all the rage for women at the beginning of the decade. These were a collaboration of the miniskirt and the pantsuit. Jeans were still popular, but now in the low hip-hugger style with the waistband on the hip. Films had a particular influence on what people wore. The movie Grease popularised the look of the 50s. Films that made people sporty
In the 1970s, a new craze, disco dancing, became very popular. Along with this dance came Saturday Night Fever, the movie, which I'm sure you're all aware of. The following dance is Scratching My Hives, which became a symbol of the disco because, despite the fact that the dance steps were very popular, few people realised that they were inspired by a nasty and very contagious disease, no, not disease, an outbreak of hives. This is it. Besides Saturday Night Fever, was music by a band which was Swedish in origin and was the hottest thing since you can guess. It's ABBA. Danny, Phil, Miriam, Gemma, Matthew and Joshua are reliving the 1970s for you.
I paid a man
We are praying And the winner is... Picnic and Hanging Rock! Isn't she great, folks? Where are my friends? What's that music? Where's it coming from? I don't hear any music. How did I get here? Where are the picnic hampers? Picnic hampers? Yes, for the St. Valentine's Day Valentine's Day picnic. Mrs. Munro had special hampers. Sure they'll turn up. Our next category is variety shows, and the nominees are the Don Lane Show, the Paul Hogan Show, and Young Talent Time. And the winner is... Young Talent Time! Diet Consciousness, Jane Fonda, Richard Simmons, and the Fitness Revolution. These were the days of self-interest and free market economics. Reaganomics and Thatcherism expressed the philosophy of the decade. Concern for the poor and dispossessed was out, greed and the yuppie were in. Terrorism and tin pot dictators were given a kick in the pants by the new tough guys. Reagan bombed Libya, and when he tried to grab the Falklands, General Galtieri discovered that the elderly British lions still had teeth. In the background, the old men in charge of Iran and Iraq sacrificed another generation of young men, some no older than Year 8 students, to achieve a map exactly the same as the one they'd started with. But the end of the decade saw a revolution of a different sort. Throughout the Western world, the environment became a pressing concern and determined the fate of governments, not least in Australia, with the Franklin and Kakadu campaigns. And in the communist bloc, the old bad men who had been running the Soviet Union and her satellites were swept from office, not by an invasion, but by a popular surge of disgust. And the man who made it all possible came not from the West, but from the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev. At home, the Australian film industry reached its peak, with productions like Breaker Morant, Gallipoli and Crocodile Dundee. Australia, we are told, is unkind to tall poppies. Well, the tall poppies got a real harvesting. Alan Bond, yesterday's America's Cup hero, saw his empire collapse. So did Christopher Skase, Robert Holmes Court, and all the other gurus of private enterprise. Malcolm Fraser was thrown out of the lodge, and in Queensland, Joe Bjelke-Petersen tried to be Prime Minister, and then self-destructed, much to the relief of anyone with a love of the English language. Mass shootings were in, at Clifton Hill and Hoddle Street in Melbourne, at Milperra along the south coast and in northern Australia,
Loonies were on the rampage. And we learnt about AIDS. It was indeed the decade of the Grim Reaper. It was also the decade of Carly Malone and Susan Renee and Terry Nedley. But let us end on a positive note. The environmental movement pinched the same from the North American Indians, but it is worth repeating in the decade of Chernobyl, the ozone layer and the greenhouse effect. We don't own the earth, we hold it in trust for our children.